Okay. All right. So the way we structured this is going to be three parts, and we said, right? You can't hear me. The way
Yeah,
you're.
yeah,
Oh, you can. Okay.
I can
Yeah,
hear you.
yeah,
Okay.
it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. So we wanted to structure this as follows. First of all, Karbanot is there are innumerable laws, and not just about the Karbanos, but about Avodah and the Beis Hamikdash, and it covers things about the structure of the Beis Hamikdash, and it talks and the Kohanim and all the laws that govern the Kohanim and who's eligible and how they have to do the service. And we just want to talk really, and we want to focus on the Karbanos. And just that itself, there's so many different categories and different types of karbanos. So what I thought to do, okay, so what I thought to do was like this. The karbanos are, we live with karbanos today, is primarily through tefillah and through it's alive in practice in certain ways through tefillah. So what we're going to start to do today, the first installment, what I want to do is talk about the conceptual things behind the idea of karbanos. A lot of the Torah that goes into not the practical technical stuff yet, but just the Torah of karbanos, which we're going to come back to in our third meeting, which we're going to bring it home, hopefully, in terms of tefillah. But and then the second meeting, we're going to talk about the more technical stuff. Okay, so today, what I want to talk about is the term carbon at all, and really the word hakrava. Okay, so this is we're going to bounce around a little bit, but I want to build one big theme. And basically, the beginning of Vayikra, the second pasuk says like this. It says, "Daber al bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem." You should speak to the children of Israel and tell them, "Adam ki yakriv mikem," a person who will bring. It means yakriv is a verb to mean to sacrifice, but literally means to come close. Mikem, from you. Karban lahashem, lahavaya. Somebody, right? V'amart aleim adam ki yakriv mikem karban lahashem. A person who would bring a sacrifice from you, meaning from Bnei Yisrael, a sacrifice to Hashem. Min ha from the domestic animal. Min ha from the ox. Umin hatzon, from the flock animals, that could be sheep or goats, takrivu et karbanchem, you should bring your karban, your sacrifice. Okay, so the word mikem, from you, is on the face of it superfluous. Adam, a person, ki yakriv, you will come to bring a sacrifice, you will sacrifice mikem, from you. So Chazal, straight away, Rashi says, we learn from mikem that first of all, this is the first overt addressing. This is really the sugya of all sacrifices, but there's many different kinds of sacrifices. And here we're talking about the sacrifices that you voluntarily bring. They're not a sin offering. It's not any other kind of offering that you're commanded to bring. This is something that you're volunteering. So mikem means it has to be yours. It has to be from you. And that's connected to the word Adam. Adam ki yaakov mikem. Why say Adam? Because just like Adam Harishon, everything that he had, or everything that he would bring, theoretically, if he would sacrifice, belonged to him. There was nobody else in the world at that time that it would be considered that he was stealing. So we know that we can't bring from Gezel, and when you bring a carbon, it has to be mikem, it has to be yours. Okay, that's a drasha. There is a deeper idea in Mikem that goes to the whole point of what Karbanot are. And that's what I want to explore and today. And we're going to understand why the word is Karban and why we're talking about Hakrava, coming close. Okay, so because the pasuk tipped us off to go back to Adam Arishon, that's what we're going to do. Okay, so but before we do that, I'm just going to read to you, or I'm just going to list to you some of the delicious stuff that the Al Shech HaKadosh talks about right then and there when when the pasuk says Mikem, and he gets into it. Before I describe or I list you some of the issues that the Alshich talks about over here, I'm going to go to another Alshich in Bereshis, and this is the story of Cain and Hevel. So just briefly, Karbanos in Bereshis, the first Karban ever that we have recorded is the sad story of Cain and Hevel. Chazal tell us that Adam Harishon brought a Karban Chatas to atone for a sin offering, to atone for eating from the Eitz Hadat, and that's alluded to in a verse in Tehillim. It says that it describes a being, a creature, an animal that had one horn and one hoof, makrin mafris, and Chazal say that this was the shor of Bereshis that Adam Rishon sacrificed. So Adam Rishon sacrificed the bull, but the first description in the Torah of a karban is with Cain and Hevel, and we all know the story. And if you look in the psukim, the Alshich has a beautiful diuk. The pasuk says, "Vayihi miketz yamim." Vayave Kayin mipri ha'adama. So Cain brought from the fruit of the earth, mincha la Hashem, offering to God. And the pasuk had just said how Cain was a farmer and Hevel was a shepherd. And this is very interesting because this is on the heels of basically Adam Harishon being informed that the earth is cursed because of him, and it will only yield things that are thorns, thistles, and maybe with a lot of sweat of his brow and labor and toil, he'll coax the staple that he needs to live by from the earth. But essentially, it's a lost cause, and it's the earth will be cursed until he returns to the earth that he was made from. That's what the pasuk says, and the Alshich over there says that it does not mean that when he's buried, it means when he comes back as as David HaMelech, in the incarnation as David HaMelech to the Beis HaMikdash, which is on the spot where Adam Harishon was made from. And we're going to come back to this because Adam Harishon is made out of Adamah, and he's made from the makom HaMizbeach, which is the makom kaparato, the place of his atonement. We're going to come back to all this. Okay, so Cain says he's going to give a mincha to Hashem, and he brings mipri ha'adama, and then it says vehevel hevi gamhu, and Hevel brought also him, meaning he also brought mi bechorot sono, from the choicest of his flock, and from their fats. Vayisha Hashem el Hevel ve'el minchato. Hashem turned, he listened, he heeded to Hevel and his mincha. Ve'el Kayin ve'el minchaso lo sha. So, and to Cain and his offering, God didn't turn. So, one of the classic approaches is that there are diukim that we say that what did Cain bring? Cain brought not the nicest stuff. He brought the stuff that wasn't so nice. And the pasuk makes a point of saying that Hevel brought from the choicest, and that's why God heeded Hevel and he ignored Cain. But the Alshich says, it says vehevel hevi gamhu. Hevel brought also him. Do you know what Hevel brought to the table, to the Mizbeach, that Cain didn't? Hevel brought himself. And that's why it says that Hashem, Vayisha Hashem, God listened, El Hevel ve'el minchato. He accepted Hevel and his mincha. What Hevel is doing here is not just bringing a physical offering on the Mizbeach. This is a rite that allows him to an act of coming close and offering himself. Okay? And that's what we want to see in the word mikem. When it says Adam ki yakriv mikem, that you should bring, the karban is not an objective magical act. It's a vehicle for you to bring yourself on the mizbeach, so to speak, to God. And that's what we're going to explore a little bit. Okay, so the Alshich on the pasuk in Vayikra, he talks about, first, it's important to note that the pasuk in Tehillim says, Ki lo tachbot zevach ve'etena ola lo sirtzeh. Zivchei Elokim ruach nishbera Lev nishbar v'nidka Elokim lo sirze. That God, it's not the slaughtered animal that God desires. What God desires is the broken heart. And lev nishbar v'nidka, a broken heart and a lowly heart, God does not turn away. Okay, meaning the key here, if there is a place for a korban, it's that it's somehow showing, or it's an act that we can do to come close. But even the sinner who's afforded a korban chatas to atone, nothing's going to happen if he doesn't do tshuva. The korban is a kapara, it provides atonement, but he's not going to get atoned if he doesn't do tshuva. Tshuva is up to him. And indeed, that's why there's something called smicha, that the person who brings the korban has to lean on the animal. It's almost like a surrogate. Okay, so we're gonna let's mention the Alsha for a second. Okay. He says that also the pasuk says min habehema. Adam ki yakriv mikem min habehema. So a person has to have in mind that you're bringing the behema in you, that you're coming, the part of you that has a chiyus from your nefesh habehamis should be subjugated to the service of God. That's a nice way to capture some of it's not just symbolism. Okay, so I'm going to come back and discuss how basically Adam Rishon was built to incorporate all these orders of life and vitality that God invested in the world in him, and they correspond to various orders of living things. And that's what we have to do, meaning we're bringing ourselves close by putting them on the Mizbeach. That's going to be the picture that we hope to develop. Okay, so he talks about how a person has to think first that Adam ki yakrav mikem, it has to come before Karban la Hashem. Terem asot Karban behemto, before a person brings a sacrifice of an animal, sheyechaven ki'ilu et atzmo hu makriv. A person has to have in mind, has to have intent that he's bringing himself. Umi yiten ubachar bo kono lekarban. If only, what would he not give if that God should choose him for a karban? V'ikana b'chashvo ki elav ya'ata hakrava be'etzem v'rishona. Make yourself the karban. Now, the karban doesn't mean that you're giving yourself up, that you must expire, that you're slaughtering yourself. It means that everything you have and your whole being is God's. God told Avram Avinu at the Akedah, greater than dying al Kiddush Hashem is living al Kiddush Hashem. Right? That's the idea of the karban. So where did a karban come from? So really, the Alshach says the karban is lekarev hanefesh al Hashem. And then also in the physical acts, like in the smicha, yavir tumato el habeima, in the event if somebody is trying to come with a kapara, he's trying to effect atonement, so he should have in mind when he does the smicha to transfer the tuma from him onto the animal, and that the animal burning on the mizbeach is the tuma dissipating. So we see already that there's a lot of built-in symbolism here, how the karban, the physical parts of the karban are surrogates, essentially, to facilitate for this experience. And really, really, the experience is mikem. It's to give from yourself. Okay, so we mentioned Avram Avinu just now in the Akedah. So Avram Avinu, okay, so there's three points that we should cover. One is that karban, like we just mentioned. The other is the person himself and the correlation that a human being has to the karban that they're bringing, the various different correlations. And the other thing is that it's very, very important that this karban is enacted in a special place, the makom hamikdash and the Beis Hamikdash, and that's in that connection. And we're going to talk about these 3 points, how they keep on coming together. We're talking about Avram Avinu. So Avram Avinu at the Akedah, it says, when Hashem says, don't slaughter Yitzchak, and then Avram Avinu sees an ayal, and he slaughters the ayal instead, he says, Vayikra la'Avram shem hamakom hahu Hashem yir'eh. He called that place, specifically the makom hamikdash, Hashem yireh, God will be seen here. Asher yeyamer hayom, that it should be said, these days, Bahar Hashem yireh, that God will be seen on that place, at that place. So that Karban established that his children will ultimately come to bring Karbanos to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that place, that there's a place, a special place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu earmarked to do this service. Karban, so far we've been talking about the incidental personal relationship that a person has with the Karban, but why are there Karbanos in creation? Why are there Karbanos at all in reality? How did that happen? So, we're going to talk about Adam Harishon. Adam Harishon was made, there's a pasuk, the pasuk says, Na'aseh Adam. God said, let us make man. Who was he talking to? So we all know the Medrash about the Malachim, and that Rashi says that we learn proper etiquette and how to be considerate to people's feelings. There are various approaches to Nase Adam. The Alshich, in his discussion, one of the approaches that he mentions is that Nase is the collective dispatching. It's Hashem dispatching the collective elements, all the forces in creation. Hashem is employing to build Adam. That Adam is essentially a microcosm of all those things that Hashem put in creation, and those things are come together, integrated in Adam's being, so that Adam is a repository, or an extent, he's like the shliach tzibor of, whether you learn it to be the four olamos. He talks about the spiritual anatomy of an Adam in the discussion of B'Tzalmenu Kidmusenu, how we have a nefesh and a ruach and a neshama, and he talks about, we have a Yetzer Hara. So we also have, there's domem, tzomeach, chai, and medaber. We have mineral, vegetable, and animal incorporated in our human being. So the Naaseh Adam becomes all those various elements of creation that existed in and of themselves as distinct elements, important forces, all come now together are incorporated in man. And the point is, so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the Adam in the Gan, la'avdo u'leshamro, to serve him. There's that word, la'avdo, to serve him, u'leshamro, and to maintain it. That means to actively participate in a relationship with the divine where he serves him, and also to maintain the status of that relationship. La'avdo is the positive mitzvos, l'shamro are the negative mitzvos. But basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a world to be his Beis HaMikdash, and he made Adam Rishon to be his Kohen. And Adam Rishon is meant to uplift this whole world by serving God within the world. He is uplifting by keeping the Torah and doing the mitzvahs. The Alshach says a human being is taking all those elements that are put inside of him, and through this person, all those elements are being directed towards the service of Hashem. Okay, so that's the kind of the setup. Now, there's no need to sacrifice anything, you would think. The first sacrifice that we know, like I said, is Adam trying to be mechaper. That means that the first sacrifice was a sin offering, a chatas. So the introduction, meaning if Adam Rishon is incapable now of being in a state to do that, the way the setup is, and he's kicked out of Gan Eden, then his way of uplifting, maybe, he can try to atone by doing that through Karbanos. So the Karbanos, the Avodah of the Karban, actually incorporates all these various elements. So for example, Adam Rishon, like we said, is made from the Afra min Ha'adama. He's specifically made from the makom HaMizbeach. The pasuk tells us in Yisro, at the end of Parshas Yisro, it says, Mizbeach Adama ta'aseli. God says, make me a Mizbeach. The Mizbeach that you use for sacrifices should be out of Adama. We're going to explain what that means. V'zavachta alav et olosecha v'shalmecha es tzoncha v'esbekarcha b'chol hamakom asher azkir et shemi avo elecho birachticha. So make an altar out of earth, and there you can bring your animal sacrifices, your burnt offerings, and your shlamim offerings, things you bring from your flock and from your cattle. And every place that you mention my name, I will come and bless you. That seems like a non sequitur. That's actually, according to Chazal, referring to the Beis HaMikdash, because the place that you mentioned my name means the only place in the world, the only geographic location where you can mention my Shem HaMefarash, my explicit name, meaning the Beis HaMikdash. So in the base, meaning the model of a Karban, which ultimately is to be in the Beis HaMikdash, is a Mizbeach Adama. What does a Mizbeach Adama mean? Two things. Number one is it has to be resting on the earth. It cannot be raised. There has to be a connection to the earth that the carbon is coming on. The carbon is to be brought on something that's an extension of the earth. Also, it has to be filled with earth. So, for example, the Mizbeach that was in the Mishkan that they built, everywhere that they parked it, they filled it up with earth. Okay, that clearly is a reference to Adam himself, where we make ourselves the Mizbeach. That part of it, our bodies, right? The guf. There is the minerals also incorporated in the service of sacrifices. There has to be salt on the Mizbeach all the time. The salt is an ancient preservative, which is a sign of a constant covenant between us and God, that we can engage in this relationship and that we can use the service of Karbanos, whether it's to be mechaper or that's our modus of interacting with him. There's a beautiful medrash where the salt comes from. There's a beautiful medrash about how on the second day of creation, when God separated the waters, the lower waters were thrashing. Mikolot mayim rabim adirim mishperiyam. They were thrashing and in a very agitated way, calling out. They didn't want to be separated from the upper waters. So God put the salt in there as a reminder, as a covenant, meaning that through the salt, it's a reminder that the lower realm has a connection to the higher realm. Okay, that's the salt on the Mizbeach. There are things, water, you might say, is mineral, especially if it's mineral water. There are the nusach. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the structures of different types of carbonates, but essentially you have the tmidim kil chasam and the musafim, the tmidim kisidram and musafim kil chasam. There are the regular carbonos that are the maintenance of the daily order of things, the carbonos that happen in the Beis HaMikdash all the time. Then there are their special karbanos that are brought on Shabbos and Yantif, which are in addition. Those are the musafim, and they speak to a special kind of relationship that God has with the Jewish people. Then there are there's the category of the public. All those karbanos that I mentioned so far are public karbanos. That means they're on behalf of the tzibur. Then there is the individuals karbanos, and those have to do with all kinds of. They could be part of a tahara process for a certain type of impurity. It could be because a karban toda. It could be a karban yoledes for a woman who's given birth. They're all different types of karbanos. So sometimes a carbon comes with a certain measure of water. And the Mizbeach has two special holes on the bottom to receive libations of water and wine when appropriate. Okay, but the water is another part of the mineral. Then you have things that come from the tzomeach. You have things that go on the Mizbeach like a carbon mincha. There are all different types of carbonos that come from flour, whether it's barley flour or wheat flour, and there's a whole special process for that. There's wine, there's oil that comes from olives. So that's the order of the tzomeach, okay? And then the animals obviously come from the chai, the living. Now, a human being incorporates in him, we said how the guf is, the adam is his guf. You have a part of you that's so after mineral, we'll say that each successive level of creation or existence is a certain type of vitality, of living energy, of chiyut that Hashem invests in the world that testifies to a certain level of presence, transcendent presence of God in the world. The most basic level of life is that of a plant. And there are certain parts of us that we're connecting to through carbonos of plants when we bring those when we bring menachos. I'll give you just a really quick, short example of that. There's the Divrei Chaim. He explains how there's a certain type of carbon chatas that somebody would bring. Let's say if he stole something, he brings a carbon chatas. And oh, by the way, I just want to say the sin offering, I just wanted to clarify. I know we're jumping around because it's a lot of information, but a sin offering is not brought for any sin that somebody does on purpose. Any sin, any losase, any infraction on a mitzvah that somebody does that is that the punishment, if you would do it on purpose, is kares. So then, if he did it bishogeg, he can atone for it by bringing the karba. Another interesting thing that the Al-Sheikh says, he says that if a person tries to do something on purpose, if a person sins willingly, a karban can't help him because there is a fusion between the thought to do something wrong and the action. And that is a fusion which is too hard to break or separate and atone for. But in the event that you had an action that was wrong, but there was not necessarily an evil thought that came into being through the act of bringing a carbon and attaching a holy thought to atone for it, you could fix the tuma that or the blemish, the spiritual blemish that such an act would have put on somebody's soul. Okay, so the a person has okay, has a level of tzomeach, a level of vegetative life. It's not the animal vitality in him not yet that we're talking about. It's just on the cellular level what his nefesh needs to grow. A we don't get a sense from animals. There's not much of a personality there. It's the most rudimentary life force. We don't see expression of will by tzomeach, but except for just to exist. So the most basic thing, I mean, you can't interact with it. You can't engage in a relationship with it. You can water it and you could play it Mozart, but there's no real give and take. Okay, so Divrei Chaim says that there's a law when it comes to karbanos, certain karbanos, that if you cannot afford to bring the carbon that you're supposed to get your atonement, then you're allowed to bring something much cheaper. So, for example, if somebody was commanded to bring a carbon chatos out of a living animal and he can't afford it, then he could still bring his chatos from a mincha, carbon mincha. So the Divrei Chaim says that over there, the idea is that whereas one person is driven to sin by his animal instinct, his nefesh habehamis, which is inconsiderate towards the demands of the awareness of God, and does things against, just wants to do what it wants to do. So for a person to atone for that, he needs to bring a chai and have that experience with the chai and have in mind that he's being makriv his nefesh habehamis, that he's trying to bring his animal self close to God, and he wants to sacrifice his animal self to God. But a person who stole, let's say, or he sinned, and he was very, very poor, it's not his animal soul that's pushing him to do this act. It's just his basic need to live, and that's what needs the kapar. So, I mean, the point is that there are different elements of our being and our nefesh, and there's a correspondence and a correlation to various karbanos and the act of subjugating those forces within ourselves or bringing them close to God. Okay, so that was the idea of Adam Harishon and Adav ki yakriv mikem, that just like Adam is the shliach tzibor in his makeup of all the forces in the world, mikem, it has to be from us enacting those aspects of us when we come to bring a karba, because it's about hakrava and coming close. Okay, so I want to go back to Avram Avinu again, because there's a beautiful Gemara in Chagiga. It says, Dorash Rava. Rava expounded. There's a verse in Shir Hashirim that says, Mayafu pa'amayach ba'na'olim bas nidiv. How beautiful are the soles of your feet in shoes, the daughter of the prince. So Rava said, what is that pasuk referring to? How beautiful are the palms of your feet in shoes, you princess. He says, Kama na'in raglein shel Yisrael b'shal she'olim l'regel. How beautiful are the feet of Am Yisrael when they're going up to be Ola Regel. They're coming 3 times a year. And we're not just talking about the males who actually engage in who bring the burnt offering of Re'iyah, but even women have to come up to the gates of Yerushalayim because they have to engage in, they have to have a piece of meat in Yerushalayim of Hektish so that they can have Simchas Yom Tov. So women are commanded also to partake of the Shalmei Chagiga, and all of Am Yisrael goes up to be Ola Regel these 3 times a year, and they're enacting this central relationship that they would have with Hashem as expressed through the makom hamikdash and the mizbeach and the karbanos that we bring. And how do we understand this praise from this pasuk? So, but who's Bas Nediv? The daughter of the prince, Bito shel Avraham Avinu. We're referring to Am Yisrael here as the daughter of Avraham Avinu, Shenikar Nediv, because he's called the Nediv. A Nediv doesn't just mean a benefactor, but it also means he who volunteered himself. How do we know that Avraham Avinu is referred to over here when it says Nediv? Because there's a pasuk in Tehillim that says, Nedive amim ne'asafu. Those that volunteered themselves from all the nations, all gathered. Am Elokei Avram. They gathered in with the nation of the God of Abraham. Meaning the converts all came to the nation of the God of Abraham. So the Gemara says, Elokei Avraham, velo Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Why does this verse in Tehillim call us the nation of the God of Avram and not the God of Yitzchak and Yaakov? Ella Elokei Avram. Rather, we're identified here as Elokei Avram, Shahaya Tchila Legerim, because he was the first. Sorry? I can't hear. Are you on mute? Okay. Elokei Avram, velo Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Elokei Avram, Shahaya Tchila Legerim. Okay. So we're saying that the pasuk in Shir Hashirim is saying, so to speak, God is marveling. He gets such nachas out of Am Yisrael when they're Ola Regel, and because they're acting out somehow, they're expressing some sort of connection to Avram Avinu. Okay, so Avram Avinu here in reference, so the Gemara does not explain to us why Aliyah the Regel has anything to do with Avram Avinu. We understand that we're calling Am Yisrael, we're saying so Am Yisrael is very, very special and wonderful, and they're doing a great thing. And we're linking that to Avram Avinu. And why Avram Avinu over here? We're saying the fact that he was a Tchila Legerim, whether he started the movement of Gerim or he himself was the first Ger. But what does Avram Avinu have anything to? Why should we talk specifically about that aspect when we're talking about being Ola Regel? The idea is because being Ola Regel is over here is being seen as the highest expression of Nediv, of Avram Avinu's Nedivus, because the Beis Hamikdash is where the Avodah is done, these Karbanos, which are essentially, they all have to be Mikem. And Avram Avinu was the first one who gave, right, in a world where we know the world that he came from, after everybody forgot, he was the only one, right, who said, hey, I'm going to give Mikem. And at the Akedah, it's because of him, at the Akedah, when he said that this place should be b'makom Hashem, right? Shem hamakom ahu Hashem yira'eh. It's because of him and the Akedah and what he wanted. It was his hopes and dreams that this place should be the place where everybody comes, and especially his descendants, where they can come and bring karbanos to Hashem and celebrate their relationship with Hashem. It's specifically Avram Avinu. Okay, so, and it's called Shalosh Regalim, it's 3 times a year. So we're saying how beautiful the Ragleim, the legs, right? But, the Regel is also called Shalosh Pa'amim, Mayafu Pa'amayach, right? It's called, it's Shalosh Regalim, and the pasuk says Shalosh Pa'amim Bashana, 3 times a year. Yera'eh kol zochorcha. The mitzvah of Re'iyah is also called Regalim and also Pa'amim. So this pasuk says the Pa'amim are a reference to the mitzvah of Re'iyah, which got its name in a deep way from Avram Avinu saying, this is a place of Har Hashem Yera'eh, right? And it's all in the schus of Avram, who's a Nediv. So this whole idea of a Beis Hamikdash, that his descendants have a Beis Hamikdash, where we enact this relationship with Hashem through the Karbanos, is through the Nedivus of Avraham, and that takes us back to Mikem. Okay? So now that we're talking about the makom hamikdash a little bit, we said before that Adam Rishon was taken from there, the makom hamizbeach. So I just want to talk a little bit about the idea of, or the history of bamos. Okay, the pasuk says in Devarim. Just want to. Okay, so. So the pasuk says in Devarim, it says, "Ki lo ba'asem ad ata el hamnucha ve'el hanachala asher Hashem lekecha nosen lach." So Hashem's talking to them in the Midbar, or Moshe is telling them, "You have not come yet el hamnucha ve'el hanachala." On the level of pshat, it means to arrest to your inheritance, your portion, meaning Eretz Yisrael. Asher Hashem elokecha noten lach. You haven't come yet to the place that Hashem's going to give you. But you will, va'avartem et hayarden. You're going to cross over the Yarden, v'yashavtem ba'aretz, and you're going to settle in the land. Asher Hashem elokechem manchil eschem. That land which Hashem, your God, is giving you to an inheritance. V'haniach lachem mikol ayvechem misaviv, v'yashavtem betach. Hashem will place you there firmly from all your enemies around. You will be safe. V'yashavtem betach, and you will live securely. V'haya hamakom asher yivchar Hashem elokechem, and it will be that the place that Hashem elokechem will choose, bo lishaken shemo sham, to settle His name there. Shama taviu, that's where Shama tavi. Shema taviu es kol asher anochi mitzaves, and that's where you bring everything that I've commanded to you to bring, all the karbanos, all the sechem, v'zivchechem, your burnt offerings and your other animal sacrifices, ma'asro sechem, utrumas yedchem, even the things that you have to eat biktusha v'tara, like meiser and truma, all the things you have to eat in Yerushalayim, it has to be at the place that God will choose. V'chol mivchar nidrechem, and all the choicest of your voluntary offerings, asher tidru l'Hashem, that you volunteer to Hashem. So the pasuk says that there's going to be a place, and that's where you got to do it. And Chazal say that when it says "Ki lo ba'atem ad ata el hamnucha," because you haven't come yet to minucha ve'el hanachla, and also to the nachla, the portion, it says minucha is not talking about getting into Eretz Yisrael. Minucha are the temporary rests that we have with the Mishkan. And Nachala is when we're finally parked in when HaKadosh Baruch Hu finally chooses His permanent residence in Eretz Yisrael. So that means that as long as there's something called Minucha means that there was no centralized place, that there had to be a Mizbeach because there was not a final resting place yet. So the halacha was that there was something called a bama. There's two types of bamos. A bama is essentially a mizbeach. There's something called bama gedola and bama ketana. Bama ketana was your own personal mizbeach that you had in your backyard, and you were allowed to use that till they built the Beis Hamikdash. You were allowed to use that for any personal, voluntary offering that you want to do to Hashem. You can have your own shul in your backyard and party with Hashem. But if it had to do with any chiyuv that you had to be part of a karban that was a tzibur offering, a collective offering, for example, a karban pesach, you wouldn't be able to bring it on your own personal bama. You'd have to bring it at the bama gedola. The bama gedola was the official bama that the collective had for bringing all the sacrifices that had to be brought for the tzibur. Okay, now so as long as there was a mishkan, you had a bama ketana, but the bama gedola was a mizbeach of the mishkan. At some point, the mishkan made it into Eretz Yisrael, and it was parked in Gilgal and Shiloh, and for a while, the people were allowed to have bamas until the Beis Hamikdash was established. Once you have the mizbeach by the Beis Hamikdash, bamas are a no-go. It's not personal anymore. It has to be part of the collective relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through HaKadosh Baruch Hu settled in His Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so that's something that happened when we came into Eretz Yisrael, and that is the evolution of the aspect of the Mizbeach. Um, see, before we start getting into the technical issues of Karbanos, if there's anything else we want to mention here. Okay, so the uh, the carbon tzibor, there's Mitzvah Hashem, maybe next time we'll go through it a little bit, but there is a beautiful approach that charts all the carbonos of the avos in Bereshis end up being the archetype for various carbonos tzibor that Am Yisrael has. So, meaning that the various types of carbonos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us in the Torah to do are all built on particular karbanos that the avos had, and that's another nice aspect of the avodah that we have in the Beit Medrash, which is built on the relationship that Kadosh Baruch Hu had with the avos. So Mitzvah Hashem will do that. In Bereshis, you have, like I said, we have the invisible carbon of Adam Rishon, which isn't mentioned. You have Cain and Havel. You have Noach, and then you have the avos. And the avos are all very, very interesting. It says every time they bring a carbon, there's a story involved. There's sometimes it talks about the carbon, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't say. Um, and then you have the carbon Pesach in Shemos. The carbon Pesach is very interesting because it's not really a classic carbon. It's a carbon that you have to eat. Most carbonos, the Kohen has to eat if anybody eats them. And carbon shlamim, which a carbon Pesach is included in, the Bailim eat also. In fact, Chazal say that a carbon shlamim, and there's different kinds of carbon shlamim. A carbon shlamim is called a shlamim because I think there's a Gemara. Here, I don't know if I have it on me. There's a Gemara in Yevamos that says that it makes shalom between the parties, meaning the parties that eat it. So, for example, there's a chilek that goes on the mizbeach, and there's a chilek that the Baal eats, and they're called shlamim because it makes shalom. And there's various drushes like that, that somehow it's something that everybody partakes in, and it's restorative. So anyway, so the carbon Pesach is kind of unique, but all other carbonos, classic carbonos, you have right. Okay, so those are. I'm sorry. You have the carbon Pesach in Shemos, then you have carbonos by Har Sinai. Very, very interesting because it says that they brought certain types of carbonos, and there's a machlokis in the Gemara if these were precursors to carbonos that appear later. For example, the carbonos that they brought at Har Sinai, were they already starting the carbon tamid of the Beis Hamikdash before there was a Beis Hamikdash? Meaning they're coming to God and they're going to initiate from now on from Har Sinai a regular carbon, a daily carbon. The carbon tamid is mandated. It's very time specific. All the carbonos, various carbonos have limited time that you can do that. There's one of the things I want to do in Mitzvah Hashem next time we meet is we're going to go through a Mishnah or two in Maseches Zvachim to show you a formula of kind of like how a carbon works. It'll talk about, let's say, a certain type of carbon, which is in a certain category, geographically where it's pointed in relationship to the Mizbeach, where it has to be slaughtered, where the blood gets dripped, what kind of, how much, well, it doesn't say, there's the avodas hadam, which are all the various things till you sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach, and then what parts of the animal go up, how many, if it's eaten, how many days and how many nights you have to eat it before you can't eat it anymore, and who's allowed to eat it, and where you can eat it. So we're going to do a Mitzvah Hashem, a Mishnah or two next time, just to show you, to get a sense of what the actual avodah is and all the different various elements that go into the rite. But so basically, you have in Matan Torah, there's zvachim and there's olos. You have animal sacrifices where people also eat, and some of it goes on the mizbeach, like shlamim, and you have olos, which are entirely burnt up. And there's a machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel if these were the carbonos that you bring when you're ole regel, called the meaning is this a burnt offering where the burnt offerings of Maimon Har Sinai, the burnt offerings of Re'iyah, of the mitzvah of Re'iyah, or were they the olos of the Karban Tamid? The Karban Tamid, there's one in the morning and one in the afternoon. It has to be brought. The one in the morning can't be brought before the day starts, and it can't be brought later than midday. And then you have the afternoon tamid, and these are regular karbonos every day that fuel the universe, that Am Yisrael is a chiyuv to bring, and that daily service literally fuels the universe. Okay, so there's a discussion in Chazal before you have a Beit Medrash, before you have a Mishkan, that the karbonos that Am Yisrael are now bringing at Har Sinai, what are they paradigms or templates for, and how are they incorporated later? And it's very fascinating to think that the idea of a Karban Tamid would start over there, because Tamid is the maintenance, the constant regular maintenance of a relationship, right? If Har Sinai is a marriage, then it's go time. So all the things, like when we have a house in the Beit Medrash from Mitzvah Hashem, there's going to be a Karban Tamid, but it's going to start now because the relationship is now. So is it the Olas HaTamid, or is the tremendous monumental historical episode of Har Sinai the template of what the mitzvah of Re'iyah is supposed to be when you're Ole Regel? And therefore, the Olos that they brought were a primordial, so to speak, version of the Olas Re'iyah, the burnt offerings of Re'iyah. Now, what is this idea of Re'iyah? I'm going to digress for just a second, because we're talking about Karbanos in the Beit Hamikdash and various concepts, and this is definitely a central idea where these two collide. The Gemara says that a person who is blind in one of their eyes, according to at least one opinion in the Gemara, is not obligated to be Ola Regel and to bring a Re'iyah offering. The pasuk says, Shalosh pamim bashana, 3 times a year, Yera'eh kol zechorcha, all your males must be seen. Yera'eh, they should be seen in the Beit Hamikdash. What a funny way to say that they have to show up. They should be seen, okay? And they can't come empty-handed when they see the face of God, their master. What's going on? Who's seeing what? So the Gemara in Chagiga comes at this in so many beautiful different ways. But one of the things that the Gemara says is, it says that somebody who's blind in one of his eyes, Chazal say, they learn that they're not obligated to do the mitzvah of Re'iyah, because the word Re'iyah, it says Yera'eh kol zechorcha, all your males must be seen. But the word Yera'eh, without nikudot, if you just looked at it, could also be read Yir'eh. So there's a duality built into the word, or some sort of dialectic, that kishem sheba'in lirot kach tzrichim leira'ot. That just like you're coming to see, what are you coming to see? You're coming to be seen. That you're coming for inspection. You're presenting yourself to your master 3 times a year, that God should see you. And just like God sees you with 2 eyes, you have to be able to see with 2 eyes. That's the Gemara. That's the mysterious Gemara. So there is a meeting point here. I think did we talk about this? Maybe we might have mentioned this about Purim, about the Kruvim, Panim el Panim. But there's the idea that the Makom HaMikdash is a place of a relationship of Panim el Panim, and there's a Re'iyah, and there's a mutuality, and the idea of meeting Hashem in this place is called Re'iyah. And that goes straight back to Avram again, because in that pasuk where he says Hashem Yira'eh, indeed it says twice, it says Yira, it says, I'm going to read you the pasuk one more time. Vayikra la'Avram shema makom ahu Hashem Yir'eh, asher ye'amer hayom bahar Hashem Yira'eh. So the first one is Hashem Yir'eh, Hashem will see. And the second one is bahar Hashem Yira'eh, and the mountain of God, someone will be seen. Yira'eh, will be seen. So this idea of the mitzvah of Re'iyah, or being Ola Regel 3 times a year, which is a celebration of of our relationship with Hashem through the centerpiece of what makes it all possible, which is a Beis Hamikdash and an Avodah of Karbanos, which is all rooted back in Avraham Avinu. This allows us to be Panim el Panim and Yira'eh, and that was first initiated at Maimon Har Sinai. Ad kedei kach, the level of Re'iyah was that v'chol ha'am ro'em es hakolos. So they saw the sounds. All I mean to say is that this idea of Re'iyah, par excellence, so to speak, you can learn that Maimon Har Sinai is the template now for this idea of Re'iyah. So either way, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel differ as to what this was in terms of the roots of the Avodah Karbanos that we have today. Okay, so that's that. Then immediately after that, you have the Mishkan, and you have a description of various Karbanos that had to be brought to inaugurate the Mishkan in the beginning of Vayikra, and then after those parshios, then you have basically the laws, the official laws of Karbanos in Vayikra, and that covers a whole bunch of different types of Karbanos. And then you have, whereas when there are different mitzvahs that appear, the attendant Karbanos come up also, like you'll have, by Tazria, Mitzora, etc. And then throughout the Torah, you have Karbanos that come up. And then the other major sugya of Karbanos in the Torah is the Musafim mentioned in Parshas Pinchas. Parshas Pinchas talks about all the Musafim that you bring on all the various holidays and special days. And that's why we lane them instead of, in lieu of bringing them nowadays, we'll lane them on the appropriate day. And I heard a really beautiful idea from my father that the reason why, of all places, that the Torah tells us the Musafim in Parshas Pinchas is that in a way, the Torah wants to tell us that's what Am Yisrael stood to lose if Pinchas wouldn't have done what he did. That Pinchas restored the ability for the Shekhinah to be within the Machane, and what was at risk was these Karbanos, meaning all the Karbanos. These Karbanos show, specifically Musafim, show a special relationship that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through this manim that we're commemorating. So that's anytime you want to know what what the Musaf was, you look in Parshas Pinchas, and that's pretty much a seker of kind of the sugyos as they appear. I'm going to pause now and ask if there's any sort of questions or clarification. If there's anything that you would like to explore in our last 5 minutes. If anybody wants to unmute themselves. Okay. Okay, so Amir Hashem, next time we meet, we can talk about more technical, nitty-gritty, practical things. And then Amir Hashem, third time, we're going to talk about Mikem again, but we're going to talk about how this all turns into Tefilla and how we're living with it nowadays. Okay? Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing. I just want to say that it's not lost on me, and I just wanted to share with everybody. I think it is so cool, specifically now, how we're engaged in limud of the Beis Hamikdash and the
Yeah,
Karbanos. The Chafetz Chaim it was super important to him that people actively, consciously learn this to make it real and to bring it about. And I think it's great. It shouldn't just be the talking heads in America that are all worried about, us bombing Iran because we want to build a third temple. I don't know if you guys know about all the crazy stuff. Man, even they know they know. It's crazy. It's crazy the kinds of stuff they're saying. They're saying we're doing it all to build the third temple. But if they know, then we should know too. So
that's right.
let's make it happen. Thank you so much for letting me do this with you guys. Okay, cool too.
Thank you so
Just
much.
learning what
Thank you.
you've given us today. I mean, it's really such a tip of the iceberg. Like I just got this understanding of really how wide it is, and
Yeah,
it's not a topic that we know particularly. It's not something that people
yeah,
are attracted to. It's not easy stuff, and yet somehow this is the time. This does need to be brought into the world right now,
that's
and
right.
and it's right. It's the right time to talk about it. So
Shreinu,
Yeah.
Baruch
thank you
Hashem.
very much. That was
Baruch
really
Hashem. Thank
very
you.
beautiful
Really
stuff,
great.
and
Great.
it's really thrilling stuff. So thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Have a
Bye.